All right, so now we're joined by David Miller and Toby Thaler with the Yes on Charter Amendment 19 campaign. So you guys go ahead and take up to 5 minutes and talk about Charter Amendment 19.
Great. Thank you very much. As you know, I'm David Miller. I'm first vice chair of the 46th District Democrats. I'm also elections chair. In the nonprofit, nonpartisan world, I'm also president of the Maple Leaf Community Council. We're a 501c3, so we don't take positions on things like this, but I think the perspective I bring is useful to this. Charter Amendment 19 is really simple. It changes the way we elect our city council members. We elect our city council members, all 9 of them, currently at large. Charter Amendment 19 changes that to 7 in districts and 2 at large. The districts were put together by Professor Emeritus at the University of Washington. They are equal population. They conform with the state rules and all the other rules about conforming to, as best as you can to geographic dividing lines, rivers and the Ship Canal and I-5 and those things. The system is, starting in 2015, we'll have our first elections. We will elect actually everybody at that time. And then in 2 years after that, we will have the at-large positions alongside the mayor and the city attorney in 2017, and then we'll just go every 4 years after that. So why do we need district elections? Seattle is a growing city. It's one of the top 50 cities by population in the United States. It is only one of 3, however, that doesn't elect some or all of its council members by districts. And there's a reason why nearly all of the other cities do that, and it gives you better representation. Right now, we ask our city council members to represent 617,000 people. That's really difficult. That's more than the governor of Wyoming, more than the governor of Vermont. We only ask our city council members to each represent 214,000 members. Our state council members, our state legislators only represent 137,000 people. Under Seattle Charter Amendment 19, the 7 people, it's about 88,000 voters. Manageable, they can go out and do that. One of the best side effects for Seattle City, for Charter Amendment 19, is making sure that people who don't have a big organization, young folks, minorities, people without a lot of money can go and be effective because they can go out and doorbell their way to victory. You can't doorbell your way to victory, I don't care how much time you have, in a citywide election. It's just impossible. But you can doorbell your way to victory in a district election. Great example of that is our current Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. Nobody gave him a chance to win his election for county council, and because it was district, he could doorbell his way to doing that. And it made a big difference. It helps build our farm to do that. Under Charter Amendment 19, there's always going to be at least one member of council who's advocating for your specific needs. They're not going to ignore the citywide needs or regional needs, just like our district elected council members don't ignore countywide and regional needs, just like our state legislators don't ignore our regional and statewide needs. But they will be responsible to you to be able to, and they'll be responsible for 2 ways. It's easier for you to get them unelected if they're not listening to what the communities in their district are asking for. The other thing is, it's easier for them to actually understand what the communities in their districts are asking for. Because there's only 88,000 people, they can spend time in the district, which is something that doesn't always happen now. City council, it's kind of the squeaky wheel against the grease. With dedicated council members to those specific districts, it'll help. 45,000 people signed the ballot measure signed the petition to put this on the ballot. We have endorsements, bipartisan endorsements, Speaker of the House Frank Chop, the unanimous endorsement of the King County Democrats, the 46th District Democrats, we endorse at about 89%. Senator Adam Klein, Senator Jean Caldwell, Senator David Frock, Senator Sharon Nelson, Senator Marilyn Chase, Representative Gail Tarleton, Mary Lou Dickerson, Justin Farrell, Jerry Collette, King County Councilmember Rod Dembowski, and lots of other folks have endorsed this. It's a great government proposal, and we hope that it earns your support.
and 15 seconds, it reduces the cost of elections. Statistical analysis of the change in San Francisco shows that it reduces the cost about $76,000.
Great. So now we'll open it up to follow-up questions from the board. 2-minute answers to each of these. So any questions? So I have one, and this is maybe a critique from the left, and I'll just pass this on as I heard it as a critique, and it may be based on incorrect facts, and if so, please disabuse me of those facts that I heard. But someone told me that the city of Seattle is roughly 22% or 2/9 minority. And under this plan, you would have one district out of 9 positions that would be majority minority. So basically, that it's a plan that would not give the proportion to majority minority representation as you would to meet the 22%. So are those stats correct? And if so, or if not, please report.
The city of Seattle, of the top 50 cities in the U.S., is one of the 2 lowest minority percentages demographically of the top 50. Portland and Seattle. The King County is more minority, but the city proper is low, which means that in order to have more minority-majority districts, you would have to have more districts. When this proposal was being put together, the thought was to do 9-0 initially. But there was much discussion, and one of the arguments that I'm sure comes up many times is, well, we need to have some at-large people to consider the citywide issues that aren't beholden to a geographic specific part of the city. So we compromised at 7-2. But what that means in Seattle is, as you say, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible. Maybe you could gerrymander something, but it would be very odd. I think it's statistically impossible to draw.
You'd have to join the top half of Southeast Seattle with the top half.
You'd have to split.
Go around the border of Seattle.
Yeah, you go up by 5.
It wouldn't work.
Right.
So we kept it the way it was. There was no consideration of any demographic criteria whatsoever in the drawing of these districts other than equal population and compactness and geographic and neighborhoods. It was done by community interest, not by racial demographics or economic for that matter.
Yeah, and Toby's right. It's under a 7-2 system. It's impossible to have more than one minority-majority district. Under a 9,
you can have a second one, and one party did try and draw and was able to squeeze the second minority-majority district. It was 54%.
Right. David?
You mentioned, Toby, that San Francisco, that's my district, San Francisco also has public financing. So to what extent do you believe that this, we have 2 initiatives that we've been discussing in here. Are they connected in your mind, number 1? Number 2, who on the current council, if this were put in place today, would be redistricted out of office?
Well, they're not redistricted out of office. They have to decide. So
Would they live someplace?
they live someplace.
Who would have to move to be,
When
what would we have
the
redundancies?
when the map was drawn, we did not pay any attention to where they live.
I'm
In
certain.
the time period since then, I've looked at a map and figured out where they live. And there's 9 that have to fit into 7. So it actually turns out they're spread out pretty well, and 2 live in doubled up. Yeah, there's 2 districts that have 2 each. And other than that, they're spread out, which is surprising, so.
well, and there's some districts that don't have any, and so, one. So, it's district 5 actually doesn't have any. So, in those 2 districts where there's a council members doubled up, they just have to decide amongst themselves which one is going to run for the at-large position and which one is going to run for the district.
So it's actually 3 has 2.
Yeah.
3 districts have 2.
Yeah. And so, they have the opportunity to, they have the option to move if they need to. But, this is not about trying to get rid of the current council members we have. This is making sure that whatever council members we get in the future, pay a little bit closer attention to what happens at the community level and has that, and are able to represent that community voice. And as Toby says, to kind of get to the other part of your question, if both fair elections and Charter Amendment 19 pass, it's like nirvana, really, because we're going to be able to reduce the amount of money spent on the district elections, which will reduce the burden to taxpayers of whatever they have to do, as well as have the financing for the 2 at-large members. And like Alice mentioned, we would expect City Council to also go back and amend to put in some number, some similar system for the district elections as well. But it'll reduce costs either way.
Okay, go on.
I'm hoping you can address the concerns about the turf wars between different council members. If people, you mentioned the idea that people will be able to spend more time with their community members, find out what it is that their community is going to be interested in so that they can advocate for those issues. And you made the comparison that you said, I think, something to the effect of just as legislators don't necessarily just act on what their particular constituents want, but consider the issues statewide. I found almost, the opposite to be true in many cases. Legislators do what their, often what their constituents want. And I can think of, a handful of legislators, that are some of the centrist legislators, some of the ones out on the edges that use their constituents as their raison d'etre time and time again.
Right.
And I worry in a smaller setting at the city about the effect that turf wars could have on the dynamics of the city council. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
And 30 seconds.
and I think that what you are saying makes sense from a academic standpoint or a 100,000 foot level standpoint. But we have to remember that this is Seattle Charter Amendment 19, and Seattle voters, time and time again, whether it's on the national level, on the legislative level, on the city council level currently, or on the county level, we vote people into office who not only have the local view, but also are great champions for regional, state, national, and global views as well. I like to think that's part of, one of those reasons is we've got great, strong democratic organizations here, and so in our influence we make sure people who are not only just looking at the district in front of them, but are also looking at bigger picture issues. I think that's part of what we do. But Seattle voters have demonstrated that time and time and time again. And so in Seattle, while I think, like I said, kind of a 10,000 foot view level or an academic view, I think there may be that concern. But in Seattle, I just don't see it. Because the history of Seattle voters is we elect people who do a good job on looking at all things. And so I don't think that just by passing this, it's going to devolve. I absolutely don't believe that.
And well, this is
Thank you.
Great. Additional questions?
So I'm having a hard time, may I say thank you for calling.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
You said things like the at-large are not beholden to local issues. There's just a little bit of some double logic that I'm hearing in your argument where, and I may be just not hearing correctly, because to Evan's point, I'm very concerned that we don't evolve to localized politics, because unlike state issues, I use the expression, we live, work, and play all over the city. And so we have to keep a citywide perspective. And I'm struggling to understand a little bit of the logic of how this helps fix something that isn't broken if we're already spread across the city, if we already have really good globalized representation, if we already have a city council that is focused on citywide issues as well as what's in their own backyard.
I think I'll take about 10 seconds. I think there's a big difference between a council member who happens to live in one of these districts, which is what Toby was talking about, is that they have some geographic spread, and a council member who's actually responsible for representing that specific district. And so, to answer your question, is that's what the improvement is that they're responsible for being very close to what happens in these districts and hearing the needs of those districts. But like the answer to the previous question, I just absolutely don't believe that they're going to ignore citywide issues.
And I think if you look at how the city operates, especially in the capital budget right now, it is broken. There is a problem. And that is that the allocation of funds, and this came up in the interview during the no argument an hour ago. The money is not allocated in an equitable fashion. Fauntleroy and Lake City are completely different neighborhoods. They're close to an hour apart from each other. They have different interests. So there are citywide interests, but if you look at the allocation of resources citywide, there is an inequitable distribution of wealth and services. And in order to knit the city together in an equitable fashion, those constituencies need to be represented. They're not currently represented, even by council people who live in districts. They don't represent the people in their where they live, because that's not how they're elected. They're elected by the money that elects them. They come from the district of money.
What are the two biggest districts who donate to campaigns? It's downtown and outside the city. So this is what we're trying to get at with fair elections. This is a second complementary and important way of doing it as well.
David?
I thought I heard you say, I'm pretty sure I heard you say, that one advantage of this would be more turnover amongst incumbents, easier to take out an incumbent. And having lived in Seattle for most of my adult life, and it just seems like every election cycle, I support an incumbent that gets defeated, right? Going back to Sam Smith and Janelle Williams. I mean, if I start to think about it, it's a very long list, right? David Della. So I'm failing to see the advantage from. It seems to me, and I'll make this a question, I promise, but it seems to me that when you represent a district, right, would Sam Smith have been defeated all those years ago if he represented the central district rather than the city? I assume that he would have died in office. I don't see the inherent advantage. Could you elaborate on that statement a little bit?
Well, he's looking at me. I don't think that, in my experience, I've only been here since '73. So when I think in past elections, like especially in more recent years, as the cost has gone up, that's been the problem. The barrier has gotten higher and higher. Bobby Forich, who is a more liberal candidate than Gene Godden, could not overcome the money problem. And the last time that there was a significant turnover of people running against incumbents was because the incumbents were foolish and took money from the type.
Right.
That's the last time it's happened. If you look at the 4 people running now and the 5 people who ran in the last cycle in 11, they all draw, almost without exception, Bobby Forich was an exception, they draw very weak candidates. The strongest, I won't get into more names. Just think about the people who are running here.
And I think that, and what I said is it makes it easier to get rid of bad incumbents, and I think that that's important. An incumbent can literally ignore, under the current system, can ignore geographically half of the city and still get elected. It doesn't, if you ignore half of your district, you won't. And I think it's a really important check and balance. I was talking with somebody about this, and I noted that the ACLU never sues to change districts to at-large. They just don't. They sue to change, like they're doing in Yakima right now. They're suing to change at-large to districts, and the reason they do that is because the data show time and time again is you get more minority candidates, you get younger candidates, and most importantly, you get better representation from candidates elected by districts.
Great. So we're about out of time. You want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement?
Yeah. People complain about having representation that you don't get to vote for, decision making that you don't get a say in. Well, we have representatives in Texas and Oklahoma who don't even, I mean, they're out here somewhere as far as we're concerned, and they're making decisions that affect us. The same thing with the state legislature. We have people from Okanagan and Clark County, you know what I'm talking about. They're making decisions. We don't get to vote for them. Does that mean we should do an at-large Congress? This is a small d democracy, good governance proposal. It's time. Yeah, it's too big for at-large.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.